Welcome to the 2023 Grant Workshop Tour, our virtual edition. As many of you may have heard, we spent about 2 weeks on the road covering, I don't know, like 1,400 miles or something. This is going to be our 15th workshop. Our only one is virtual, though. But between those 2 weeks, it was just so exciting to get to travel the state, meet all of the communities, learn about the projects that are going on, and then just spread the good word that is all of the grant programs that we have. So I want to do a quick introduction. This is our staff. I'm Patrick. I'm the grant program manager. You're also going to be hearing from a couple of our other staff members, Rachel Toker with the OHV grant administrator title. She's going to be talking about the OVER grant. You're going to be hearing from Caroline Weiler. She's a program specialist here, talking about the RTP program. And finally from Carly Lanch, who is our statewide recreation planning coordinator, and she's going to be talking about our outdoor recreation programming assistance program, as well as the LWCF and some programming from the National Park Service. So one question we get a lot, particularly this last tour, is what's the Division of Outdoor Recreation? I'm sure many of you know us as either one, the Office of Outdoor Recreation, or some of us as members of the Division of State Parks and Recreation. But as of July 1 this last year, we had a merger bringing in the Office of Outdoor Rec and the Recreation Wing of State Parks and Recreation. So this is our new division, Division of Outdoor Recreation. In it, we have our grants and planning. You'll hear from many of us today, our OHV program, the boating program, and our law enforcement. It's really great to see such expanded capacity now. We just have a really ambitious staff. We're able to do so much to really help pursue that mission of ensuring every Utah can live a healthy and active lifestyle through outdoor recreation and access to natural spaces. So very excited as we go on with this new division, and please stay tuned for just all the stuff that we're able to do now. So to give you a quick look at what we're going to be talking about today, I like to give a little snapshot of kind of what's new this year. Every year we look at our programs and talking to our applicants, just having internal meetings, we think, how can we make these better? What's not working? Where do we make these improvements? So to give you a quick idea, to start, we've reduced our matches for some of our rural counties who are applying to UORG, RRI, or the RTP program. That was always a big obstacle, so we're really excited to reduce those matches. For the Off-Highway Vehicle Recreation Grant, we have a new snowmobile category as well as increased search and rescue support. It was very clear just how much more support search and rescue needs. So once again, thrilled to be doing that. State and federal agencies are now going to be eligible to apply for our recreation restoration infrastructure funding. I know they're very excited. State and federal agencies are always just such important partners there. So we're really happy to allow them just to reach out as the applicant. We've increased our award amount for the regional asset tier and our mini grant and the outdoor classroom categories. And then finally, we're working out a system for on-the-spot funding help for all of these grant programs. We just know some applicants may have a little more difficulty in securing kind of the initial costs to get their project moving, and we definitely want to work out a way to try to get that to them. So we'll talk about all of these a little bit more here in just a moment. So this is the Division of Outdoor Recreation's grant programs. As you can see, we have a lot. It's really exciting, but we're going to go to the next slide because we speak in a lot of acronyms, and as we're talking about these programs, just want to make sure everybody is aware of what we're talking about. So for our Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant, we call it the UORG, the Recreation Restoration Infrastructure Grant. We call it the RRI, Recreational Trails Program, the RTP, and the OHV, the Recreation Grant. We call it the OVER. Our Outdoor Recreation Planning Assistance Program, the ORPA, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the LWCF, and the Division of Outdoor Recreation. That is us. We usually just call us the DOOR. So as we jump into our first grant, I want to let everybody know who's online with us right now. If you do have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We have some folks monitoring the chat. We'll try to answer them kind of in the flow of things. And then also we'll do a more formal question and answer towards the end. So please feel free. We're just going to do all of our questions via the chat feature this time, so throw it in anytime you have it. So we're going to get started with our very first grant program. This is the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant, a very big program. We're so excited to see it grow. So, just last year, we were able to award more than we ever had before at $10.9 million to 85 different projects. You can see 53.5% of this grant last year went to rural. So we really emphasize making sure that this funding gets spread out across the states. We had $17.5 million in requests last year, which is so exciting to see. It's getting more and more popular every single year. 183 miles of trail was helped built by this program last year, and 23 different outdoor recreation types. So we really do prioritize making sure that this funding is going to not only a diverse group of counties, but also to a diverse record of activity types. And then all told, we've been able to fund almost $35 million. So really kudos to all of our applicants, all of our project managers out there. We get the easy job of holding onto this money, sending it out, and just incredible to see all the great work being done out there. So thank you. We look forward to kind of continuing this next year. This program itself, the UORG, this is all for new outdoor recreation infrastructure. So if it doesn't exist and you want to build it, this is the program for you. It's broken up into these three categories. We have our regional asset tier. This is our big one. It goes all the way up to $750,000. For our urban counties, they will have to overmatch, so it'll be at least a $3 million project cost. Rural counties, however, we're just going to keep you at the 1-to-1. This because all of the money coming into the UWork program is coming from that transient room tax. We do want to see economic and tourists benefits on these programs, particularly with the regional asset tier. And this one you will actually present to our grant scoring committee during their scoring meetings. But it's a great opportunity to answer any questions, help sell the project a bit more. The most popular is our Tier 1 for this program. This goes from $15,001 all the way up to $200,000. This is for, once again, new outdoor recreation infrastructure. And this one does have that county-based matching component. So you'll get to kind of see what the new matches are. They go anywhere from 50% all the way down to 20%. This one as well does need that economic and tourism benefit. And then finally, our small one is our mini grant. We just, some of these projects are small. They just, don't take a lot, just need a little bit of funding to help. We don't want people who are, working on a smaller project to have to go through the same process as somebody asking for much, much more. So we created the mini grant category. Very streamlined application, does have just the 1-to-1 matching component on all of these. And once again, this is for new recreation infrastructure. I talked about all the different activity types that we fund. This is kind of a list of all of the different kind of ones that we can do. I'm not going to go through and read all of this, but you can just see whether it's motorized, non-motorized, whether it's climbing, trails, water, wheeled. There's going to be a good opportunity for you to find funding through this program. And then also the adaptive outdoor recreation of all types. We'll learn a little bit more about that here in a moment. So one way to look at the different activity types is to look at some project examples. And I very specifically picked these ones because I thought not only were they great projects, but they're a little bit more unique. So if we look at our regional asset tier, or I think I may have lost. No, I did not. Okay, excuse me. If we look at the regional asset tier, so these are the very, very big projects. We have first this Mill Creek Ice Ribbon. This is an incredible project because not only does it have a multi-season use, since it's going to be a kind of a skate rink in the summers and an ice rink in the winters, it's also a huge event space. There's concerts are going on there. They did like a New Year celebration. It's also a huge community draw. They're bringing in food trucks. Really an amazing project that is kind of focused on that outdoor recreation right at the center of it. Next, we have our East Zion Trails. This is, a good opportunity when they're helping to disperse some of the use that they're seeing in Zion. We're all well aware of how popular that park is. You can actually mountain bike in the park, and this is kind of created on the east side of Zion. This is a huge tourism attraction. It's going to be, I don't know the exact amount of miles of trail, but somewhere like 20 to 40 miles of trail. Really an incredible project to kind of give people who are in Zion the additional opportunity to go out and ride, help them extend their stay in the nearby towns. Then we go to our mini grants. So these are just the very, very small ones. This is the Welcome Center climbing wall in Castledale. And during our grant tour, we actually got to stop by Castledale, and it was great to hear, some of the locals there say like, oh, my kids love this wall. And if you have been to Castledale, I'm sure you're probably aware of Joe's Valley. And Joe's Valley is really world-class bouldering. And so this is just a great signal to anybody coming in, any climber coming in. It's like, hey, we welcome you. Look at this climbing wall. And then also for the local youth to maybe get out, try this wall, and then very quickly they can just zip on over to Joe's Valley and start climbing on the real rock. And then finally, we have our disc golf course. This is over at SUU. If you do play disc golf course, I absolutely recommend going out, checking this one. This is just such a beautiful course, but also just a unique activity, a lot of great community support, and that small price tag on the total project cost. So, you can think really big with the regional asset tier, or you can think much smaller with a mini grant, and we hope we can help you out there. I'm looking at just kind of our classic UORG, and these are the 15,000 to 200,000. We have our Lions Park Boulders. This is in Moab. This one I really love because it's got a great regional connection. There's amazing climbing, all near Moab, and it's youth focused. So kids can come out, much like over in Castledale, try out some of these, boulders in the park, maybe get that itch and go transfer it to the real rock. It's very accessible. It's right near town. Just a beautiful project there. Then the 9,000-foot trail with the Mountain Trails Foundation. One thing I like to highlight about this one is, when we have a lot of usage on some of our trail networks, it's not always about just building a new trail kind of, nearby it or something, but maybe connecting the network, kind of adding new opportunities within the same network. And that's what they've been able to do here. It's connecting multiple trails. The Mountain Trails Foundation themselves have a long history of quality work with our grant program. And we in the advisory committee definitely sees that. And it's just a huge high demand area that they're kind of giving new opportunities to. Then we have our 24th Street Kayak Park in Ogden City. Just maybe the only kayak park we have in the state. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat if anybody knows of another one. But this is one where I think maybe like 20 years ago, a big flood kind of wiped out the previous kayak park. Since then, they worked with kind of local kayakers, the community, and were able to install just this magnificent project. It's really perfectly in line with all the great things that Ogden is doing as part of their revitalization. And it's really a tourist attraction there. And then finally, we have our community fishing ponds in Vernal. This one I just adore. It's a great skill building opportunity. There is so much water recreation in the Uinta Basin, and this one here, just right in Vernal, gives so many people the opportunity to come teach their youth how to develop these skills, how to learn how to fish. They do a lot of great events there, bringing in law enforcement, bringing in the kids, and just a lot of strong partnerships as well. That gate there was designed by the local technical school. So really leveraging kind of what the community is doing, what they value, and the skills in that community to turn into such a gem for the community. When you are looking at any of these projects, maybe you've already been inspired by some of these examples, but we want to encourage everybody to really consider accessibility when you're looking at your project. This on this slide here, this is Maggie. She's an athlete with the National Ability Center, and she's riding a recumbent hand bike. And so if you look at these bikes, just consider the infrastructure, in this case, a trail. If you are designing a new trail, consider wider turns, a turn that a recumbent hand bike can handle. If you do have gates, perhaps you're trying to keep, like, say, a side-by-side off of your trail. Is that gate also going to keep some of these, vehicles off? And then if you do have kiosk information, whether it's safety, interpretive, bring it down to an appropriate height so everybody can kind of learn and enjoy and at least understand the regulations of the area. We also have a restoration grant for updating trails. So if you are considering retrofitting one, same thing, small changes to trail layout, modification to like a boat ramp grade, for example, or maybe a cutout on a dock for fishing. Just consider what it's like. And then removal of physical barriers. We see this a lot in mountain biking trails, but they'll have like a big rock, and it's there to slow people down, maybe at an intersection. But that rock also might make it impassable for somebody in one of these bikes. And I think the important thing is we consider accessibility. Technology has really created a new world for adaptive recreation, and we don't want to see people who are using adaptive equipment have to ride and recreate in areas that are segregated. We want us to be able to recreate with our friends and family, and we want anybody who is using an adaptive bike in this case to be able to also recreate with their friends and family, bring them all together. We do have an amazing consultation opportunity on our advisory committee. We have a member of the National Ability Center, as well as somebody from the Spinal Rehab Medical Center up at the U. If you do want to bring in a lot of this accessibility planning, please reach out. Our advisory committee members will happily consult free of charge. Just talk to us and we'll go ahead and connect you with that. So we've looked at a few, our big and our small, but one question we get a lot is, what can you do about parks? What about park infrastructure? Parks are great. They are often the very first kind of experience we have outdoor recreation. It's always convenient. However, we do, have a limit. We're not going to be able to fund really classic park infrastructure like a monkey bar, swing set, slides, but we do want to figure out a way to support it. And so if you look at this slide, we kind of have this like triangle of these pillars. So the top one is a regional connection. If you're doing something in a park and there is a regional connection, that's going to be very helpful. So up here, this is in Heber. These are some boulders. A lot of great climbing there. Gets people outside. Kind of gets them introduced to something that's really amazing into the area. Another is outdoor recreation inspired. So if you do want to do like an archery course or a bike skills park in Moab, they have an urban kind of skills park for like youth to come out and ride, and then maybe go transfer that to some of the larger skills parks there. And then finally, skill building. Is it going to help kids kind of get that confidence, teach them just kind of the love of moving outside and be able to transfer that to some real trails. And then finally, you do see we have those two adaptive symbols there, but if there are things that you can do inside of your park infrastructure, whether it's like sensory, physical movement, opportunities to really enhance recreation for people with accessibility needs, please consider that, particularly if you have, a youth with some accessibility needs. A park is going to be, the easiest, best gateway to get outside. So we do understand that, and we want to support that. So that was the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant. And keep in mind, all of this is new infrastructure. However, what about all the stuff we already have? We have here our Recreation Restoration Infrastructure Grant. So this is to restore existing infrastructure. Really, this grant was established to help alleviate that massive backlog that we have of heavy maintenance on public lands in Utah. And, we're very fortunate that we have 60-70% of the state as public lands. But of course, it's going to need some love. And that's what this is here for. Really, this is for projects that are going to be in developed areas, predominantly summer use, trails, campgrounds, day use areas, water recreation, staging areas, or corrals. There's just a lot of things that we have that just do need some restoration. One thing to keep in mind with this grant, though, it does need to be on publicly owned lands. So you do want to coordinate with that land management agency. And public lands obviously can be city, county, state, federal. It's just important that they are public lands. And this one as well does have that county-based matching scale. So it could be anywhere from 50% down to 20%. Funding, it goes all the way up to $150,000. And as I introduced earlier, federal and state agencies are now available to apply for RRI funds. So very excited to see those come in. Looking at just kind of some of the different ideas you could do as you are trying to restore some infrastructure. I'm not going to read all of these, but trails, campgrounds, water recreation, accessible, and then one to bring attention to is, the funding is for the recreation infrastructure. However, we understand that if you do need to do some habitat restoration as part of the project, that's a very important thing, particularly with invasive weeds like here along the Wasatch, water quality issues. So we do want to help support that. So these habitat restoration can be an eligible cost within the larger project, but keep in mind, these cannot be a standalone project. So if the whole project is only focused on habitat restoration, unless there is a recreation infrastructure component, it will be considered invasive. But do consider, the habitat when you are considering restoration. So to take a look at just some of our example projects, once again, I try to pick slightly more unique ones. To start, we have the San Rafael Equestrian Campground and Trailhead. I love to give a shout out to the San Rafael Backcountry Horsemen as often as I can. They just do so much work, and it doesn't seem like they have a ton of capacity, but they really make it work. They're volunteer-led. In this case, they were able to update this campground for modern use, like creating more corral, doing some fire mitigation, which is great, working with the cheatgrass to get that out. But they're just a testament to what a small group can do through volunteerism and support. Next, we have the Climbing Anchor Maintenance. This is with the Salt Lake Climbers Alliance. So if you have been climbing here in the Wasatch, you think this one here in Little Cottonwood, some of those anchors have literally been there, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, these are decades old, and at some point it just becomes very unsafe. So this one, it's a unique activity. This is such specialized work. Salt Lake Climbers Alliance is hiring a professional crew going out to do this work. It's promoting user safety. The last thing we want when people are climbing anywhere in the state is to clip a bolt and have it spin on them. We want them to be able to focus on the beauty of the climb. So next, we have our Rock Cliff Recreation Area. This is in Jordanelle State Park. This is an amazing project done by the Wasatch Mountain Institute. So, there was a flood, a lot of floods, but this one knocked out power, really created kind of a shutdown for a lot of this area, and Wasatch Mountain Institute was able to step in, kind of get some solar power, restore this closed area, work on the boardwalks, and now they've turned this into an amazing education site for youth, for families, and just individuals. So if you are near Jordanelle, I definitely recommend checking out the Rock Cliff Recreation Area. Finally, the Little Hole Recreation Trail. This was done with Daggett County Trails. I don't know how many people we have on that are fly fishers, but I personally am, and this is one of the most amazing places to fly fish in the state, if not the country. However, most people access this river through doing the A section on the boat. However, if you do not have a boat, the only way you can access it is this trail. But with the flow rates just going up and down as they're releasing from the dam, this trail essentially just washed down into the river, became very unsafe, really difficult to traverse, and so they kind of thought, like, what can we do to create this boardwalk to make this trail and have it last? So they ended up researching the technology they use on oil rigs out in the Pacific Ocean. They used that problem solving, installed those boardwalks, and now it should be good to go for a very long time. So if you have any questions about just this is really creative problem solving they did on this, please reach out and I will absolutely connect you. So that was the Recreation Restoration Infrastructure Grant. We also have our Utah Outdoor Classroom Grant. So this grant awards up to $15,000 to community-based nonprofit organizations or publicly funded K-12 schools. If you can take a look, we have a virtual webinar on this grant specifically later today. It's going to be from 4 to 5 p.m. So if you want to register for that and get a deep dive, that's what we'll be doing there. But really, this kind of started during the pandemic when there was a really big push for more outdoor education. And pandemic or not, outdoor education is just an incredible thing to introduce to our youth. There's just so many benefits, and we wanted to figure out a way to support that. This program itself is for infrastructure, so this is not going to be there to help support programming or equipment, but just for the infrastructure, thinking like pergolas, thinking about gardens. Going back to that last slide, you can actually see this is in Mill Creek. This is their kind of pollinator, their monarch pollinating garden. Just a good opportunity to get some hands-on experience. But if you are interested in doing this, I would recommend checking out our Utah Outdoor Classroom Design Guide. This was designed with a graduate student at Utah State University's Landscape Architecture Department, and it really will just walk you through the whole process. You'll start with just an idea, kind of get a picture of where you want to use the space, and then go through and consider all of these important elements, in this case, like winds and Wi-Fi, busy roads, utility access. But you can really start with an idea. By the time you finish working yourself through this guide, you will have an actual fleshed out concept plan that will be good enough to actually submit with your application. So now the fun stuff. We talked about all of our different programs and our projects, but this is kind of the nitty gritty. Here we are on our matching scale. We talked about how talking through, especially on our statewide tour, talking to the applicants, we really do just hear a lot about what's making this program work for them and not work. And one was really the one-to-one match across the state. So we kind of worked with the Kempsey Gardner. We developed a formula that's using population and per household income to come up with this. So this is our matching scale. So some counties are going to still be at that one-to-one match, but other counties are going to go all the way down to a 20/80 match. All of these grants, though, will still be given as a reimbursement based. So you complete the project, you complete the spend, and then we come in with our match. We do allow for up to 75% of the reimbursement to be processed before project completion. So if you do just need an influx of cash, you can absolutely submit earlier. Half of the applicant's match needs to be cash. The other half can be in kind. And we talked about the regional asset tier. For urban, they do need to overmatch a little, so a $3 million total project cost. But for our rural, it's just a one-to-one match. And then one thing we do require is all applicants have to put some amount of cash into the match. We call this skin in the game. We just want to make sure the applicant themselves has some financial stake in it, since they are going to be the project manager. We want to look at some allowed costs, disallowed costs, but it's almost easier to look at the disallowed because the allowed, it really is the stuff that is going directly towards the infrastructure. We will always prioritize that. If we are putting this money out, we want to make sure it is as much as possible is going to the infrastructure. So looking at the disallowed, if you have storage buildings that you're building that are going to be used for other things, that's going to be considered disallowed. If you're using your own equipment or materials, we don't consider that a match. We want you to be able to use your employees. We have some really talented employees, of course, but there are going to be limits to how much you can use your employees, especially if they're going to be doing work they otherwise would still be doing. If you are running like a trail crew, like the Mountain Trails Foundation, for example, they're using their own trail crew. That kind of goes outside of this limit. We understand that is directly related to the infrastructure. Administrative costs we don't consider allowable. These are like photocopies, marketing, grant writing. Ongoing maintenance also is not an allowed cost because we expect you to have a maintenance plan. We want to see when you are conceiving the project and you're about to build it that 5-10 years down the road, it's still going to be in good condition and sustainable. We don't want you to have to apply for a restoration grant just a few years later. Also, purchase or donations of real estate for the project is considered ineligible. That one I like to bring special attention to, though, because if you are getting a great donation, if somebody is or you did purchase, there's still an opportunity for you to show that on your application. On the budget sheet, there's an ineligible project cost portion. You can reflect it there. You can reflect it in numerous places, and please do. That does show a huge commitment that you've been able to secure from a partner or yourself to the project, and that will bode well in how your application is scored. Just because we can see that, even though it's not considered an eligible match, it's still a very important part of the project. And then finally, the most important one that you're going to hear from all of us today as we talk about our grant programs is any work that's actually completed before the grant award, before that contract is signed, is considered ineligible. So if you are really itching to go, please wait. Please do not do any work, make any spend until you have that contract signed. Otherwise, it's considered ineligible. We can backdate your contract, a little bit, but not any day before our actual scoring meeting. For some people, this will give them an extra couple weeks. Depending on the seasonality of the work, that could be exactly what you need. So let us know if you do plan on trying to get going as quick as you can. We will try to backdate it, to the earliest date that we can. So those are the matches. This is what the actual application's going to look like. So the application sections, contact, project summary, pretty straightforward. Project readiness and scheduling, pretty important. We want to make sure that your project is shovel ready. If it doesn't look like your project is even going to start within a year, we're going to ask you to just wait and reapply the following year. So we want to make sure these are shovel ready because there's a lot of projects out there, and the ones that we want to reward are definitely the ones that are ready to go. When we look at scheduling, we do not need a day-by-day schedule or week-by-week. Really, we just want like a 6-month by 6-month. We want you to be able to show how this project is going to go from the very first day to completion. Economic impact. This is specifically for the UWork Tier 1 and Regional Asset Tier. Those other grants do not have this element. But how is this going to impact tourism and economics in your community? And remember, it doesn't just need to be how many people are staying in hotels. There's a lot of great ways to measure economic impact, whether it's the support local businesses are going to get. A healthier community is generally a more economically stable community. So there's just a lot of opportunities to show economic impact, including how many people are staying in hotels. But you're allowed to think outside of that. Recreation access and value. This one's really for the community, for you to let us know. What does your community value? What access do they have? Do they not have? Do you need more of something? Do you need to disperse something? So this is really up to you to let us know what your community is valuing. And then we have our required supportive materials and attachments just on the other table. So location map, W-9 for applicant logo, pretty straightforward. The recreation site plan, engineering plans, or conceptual drawing. This one really depends on your project. If you're doing just a basic trail through a city park, we probably don't need massive engineered plans. A recreation site plan is going to be good. However, if you're doing like a larger marina project, we do want to see engineered plans. For those big projects that obviously need that kind of planning, we do want to see plans that are appropriate for the project. Letter of support from the local tourism or economic development office. Once again, this is just for the Tier 1 and Regional Asset Tier, but reach out to your tourism directors, your economic development directors. They're going to be great partners. They'll support. They'll give you probably a lot of language, maybe connect you to different partnerships, different funding opportunities. We have a wonderful network and take advantage of them. Statement of responsibility. We want to make sure that these are going to be maintained, and that's what this one does, just showing that you do have a plan, that you understand what the cost is going to be for the maintenance looking down the road. Budget spreadsheet, we have webinars for this. Our staff is always going to be able to help you on this, but obviously we just want to see how the money is going to be spent in as detailed manner as possible. Written confirmation of donations from financial partners. If you are getting a nice donation from somebody, one of your partners, we just want a simple letter. It doesn't need to be notarized. We just want to make sure that they are clearly going to be doing it and they're aware of it. Timeline we already talked about, just 6-month by 6-month. And then one other small change we did this year with the UORG and the RRI is these are going to now be 28-month contracts instead of just the 24. So we extended it just 4 months. It's going to give one additional season for work, and it will bring it in line with the federal fiscal year. So we hope that extra season is going to be helpful. MOU or landowner agreement. If you are working on somebody's land who is not you, we do want to make sure that they're okay with it. If you're a county applicant working on county land, we don't need to see this, and so on. And then finally, federal permits or a letter stating their status. To be very clear, the UWork program, the RI program, none of these require NEPA. That will not be something that is required. However, if you are working on Forest Service land, if you're working on BLM land, they do. So you definitely want to work with them. And start early. That's one thing we've always learned. If you do need NEPA for your project because it's on Forest Service land or BLM land, start early, talk to them now, and get that process going. I see someone in chat. Are the charts going to be available to print? Yeah, we'll have all of these slides available. You can download them. We'll put that link in the chat here in just a moment. But yeah, the entire slides, everything that we show you, the program guides, it's all there available for you. So the important dates for all of the UWork programs, and just to keep in mind, we have a lot of different programs. They do have slightly different dates, but this is going to be every one that we've talked about so far. So these grants are going to open up on January 17th. That's next Tuesday. And then they're going to close 3 months later, March 17th. The one thing I want to bring attention is that early deadline, Tuesday, February 28th. This is your opportunity to submit your application to our staff and get a full review before your final submittal. We will look at your application. We will look at everything from the language, from the site plans, the budgets, the letters of support, and give you as good a feedback as we can. It's really something you should absolutely take advantage of if you can. I think in my entire time doing these staff reviews, I've only had one application that I reviewed that did not get funded. So we know our advisory committee, we know this program, and we know how to help, make your project, shine in this instance. So please take advantage of that. And it's really a fun part of our job is getting to review these before, because we spend all year just being like, ooh, they're coming, and to actually get to dive into them is really fun. So that's going to be it with me with the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant. Does anyone have any quick questions to put in the chat before I pass it over to my colleague? Give that just a moment. Okay, I think we're good. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Rachel. She's going to be talking about our Off-Highway Vehicle Recreation Grant. Oh, I did just see two. Yes, this is being recorded. We'll have that posted up soon. Projects have 2 years to be completed, correct? Yes, projects now have 28 months. So we did extend it 4 months. So we'll have 28-month contracts instead of the 24-month contracts. Okay, Rachel, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it. So I will be talking about the Off-Highway Vehicle Recreation Grant. It'll also be known as OVER. So during my presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I can answer those along the way or when I'm done presenting. Okay. So the funding for this grant originally came to be in 2018 general session through the House Bill 143. So what it did is it actually increased off-highway vehicle registration dollars in the state of Utah. It was a small increase, but that increase in funding allowed us to go in, kind of put that in a different pot of funding, and then distribute it throughout the state. Prior to House Bill 143, the funding, when you would register your machine, what it would do is it would actually just go back to where the resident resided, especially which county they resided in. To give you an idea, the majority of our OHV registered users in the state of Utah are generally along the Wasatch Front. Salt Lake County itself has approximately 3.5 miles of OHV trail, and Salt Lake County was receiving most of the funding for this, for those registered machines. So it really wasn't benefiting the users as a whole, especially for our rural communities that receive a lot of OHV recreation. So pretty much what we did is we pulled the funding from those counties, and we actually distributed it throughout the state state in the form of grants. So with this grant, we have 2 grant cycles. Our spring cycle is actually up and coming. It'll open February 1st and it closes March 31st. And then our summer cycle has already technically taken place for our last quarter, our last fiscal year, which was June 1st through July 31st. Our grants are approximately open 60 days. If any of these opening or closing dates fall on holidays, weekends, etc., we do generally push them to the following Monday, just to make it easier on our applicants as well as our program staff. So this grant is for federal agencies, tribal governments, state agencies, political subdivisions of the state, and Utah OHV nonprofit organizations. They do have to be incorporated in the state of Utah, but when we talk about Utah OHV nonprofit organizations, if you are applying for search and rescue and you are a nonprofit search and rescue organization in Utah, you can actually apply for this funding. All right, so with this grant, we have approximately $3.5 million available annually. And then as you can kind of see on the side of this screen is that it can be split into different categories. Our next slide, we will talk further about the different categories and how much funding we have available. But so every year we have $3.5 million available. Our project requests generally range from $150 to $350K. We have that asterisk there because there are different project categories and they do have different funding thresholds. As Patrick stated before he was done, we do have a 28-month timeline. So this grant, pretty much once contracts are awarded, you will automatically have a 28-month contract period. And then something new for this grant, this is already taking place with the UR grant, which Patrick was talking about, but we are accepting contingencies, a 10% contingency going forward. So prior to this cycle, we've never really had that in place. With everything that's been going on regarding COVID and just inflation, we are allowing that right off the bat. We recommend that you put it into your application when you're applying instead of trying to come back later for it, because chances are all of our funding will be allocated, so we will not be able to put that funding to projects because it'll already be set aside for other projects. So again, with that 10% contingency, just put it immediately in your budget. And then, so as I was stating, we do have all different categories. So we have trail work, access protection and education, search and rescue, snowmobiles, OHV tourism, and then we are going to have an OHV land acquisition project. The OHV land acquisition is going to be new this quarter. It will actually be a year-round grant that you can apply for at any time. So, this is how much funding we have available annually. Our trail work is predominantly, this is the use that we want this grant to be used towards. So trail work receives the majority of funding. But then from access protection and education, we've combined those two categories. They do have $525,000 available annually. Our search and rescue, we've increased this amount. Actually, we've even increased it more so recently because there's a huge demand for it. Our search and rescue is a very sought after category. We do receive a lot of requests. Generally, we receive about $1 million in requests every year. So we did increase that. It formerly used to be, I think at the beginning of this, when it first started, I believe it was about $150,000 for search and rescue, so we have drastically increased that funding amount. New this cycle is we do have $350,000 for snowmobiles. Prior to this, we would not have snowmobile at all included in this grant, but now going forward we will. Our OHV tourism, we only have $105,000 available annually. Again, all these categories, because it is a biannual grant, there are 2 cycles with it. We generally will put half the funding for the first cycle and then half of it for the second. So again, if you apply for this, especially the search and rescue category, and you do not receive funding the first go around, please reapply. It might just be limited funding based on our cycles. And then, can snowmobile motorized areas education count? Yes, it can. So with that, we do consider snowmobile when you falls under education just to fall to make sure for snowmobile education, we recommend that you apply for snowmobiles instead of versus education. So again, yes, you can apply for that for snowmobile education. Again, I recommend that you just apply under snowmobiles versus the education category. And then lastly, if that didn't answer your question, Allison, please let me know and I can kind of sit down with you and talk about it further. But then for our last category, our OHV land acquisition, it does have the possibility to use the full funding amount. Again, it would just pull from the trail work category. We're not really expecting to receive a huge ton of requests for OHV land acquisition, but if we do going forward, we will be asking for more funding from the legislative session if that is the case. But again, it won't pull from the other categories on the bottom, it'll just pull from the trail work category. And again, our OHV land acquisition is a year-round land, grant. Okay. So with this grant, we currently have no set matching amount. As I go and present, there will be asterisks along my presentation. So that first asterisk is that our OHV tourism category, we do require at least a 25% cash match, and we want to see this from the applicant. Again, that is only for our OHV tourism category. As for the other categories, we do not have a set matching amount. We do require matching funds. So match can be composed of cash, in-kind, or a combination of the two. As Patrick was saying, we do like to see skin in the game from our applicants, especially if it is a large ask. And then if you are requesting funding and it is under a 25% match, we kind of want to know why. By no means will this hinder your application. It's more so to just get an understanding of what's going on within your community. Because if we have leftover funding at the end of our cycles, we might have the ability to give you even more funding than what you're requesting. So again, if it's less than 25%, we do not, it won't hinder it at all. It's just kind of an explanation of what's going on, just because in the past, whenever we've had kind of changed our requirements for matching, there's been a little pushback from our rural communities, which is fine. But again, it's just kind of wanting to understand what's going on within the community, so we get a better idea of what's happening. All right, so this is a lot of text. I won't go into everything, but pretty much these are the eligible OHV recreation requests. I will talk about some of the items. Actually, further on in my slides, it does mention a few of them. But pretty much when it comes to this grant, we are unable to pay for anything non-motorized. Again, the funding for this grant comes from OHV registration dollars, so therefore we have to make sure that we're using the funding properly. When I say this mostly comes into play with our search and rescue and our snowmobile categories, because just because it's search and rescue, it's never going to be predominantly motorized or non-motorized. It's always going to be a mix. So again, if you are applying for search and rescue, we want to make sure that you are applying for the percentage that does pertain to OHV search and rescue. Even if you go out on a trail and it's a search and rescue call and you are using a side-by-side, unless you're helping a OHV user who's in distress, then it's really not considered a search and rescue call. Because if you're going out on a side-by-side but you're helping a backpacker, again, it's great that you're using a side-by-side, but it's not a search and rescue call. So again, keep that in mind. Some other things that we can't really pay for with this is generally food, water, swag items, clothing, those kind of things like insurance. There's a couple other things, but pretty much anything that will not really support or help the OHV community as a whole. There's really a lot more that it can do. There's just some drawbacks for what it cannot do. But there's really not a lot. While you are applying for this grant, it will detail those. So I didn't want to put it in this slide to hinder everything, but it will be on our application what it cannot fund. So if you are going through it, you kind of have a little bit more of an explanation. But there is a lot that it can do. All right, so I'm going to quickly go through the 6 different categories. The first 3 for our trail work category. As you can see on these 3 different square boxes for the different categories. Generally, these are the thresholds that we allow for each application. You will see that there are asterisks on 2 of them. So when it comes to trail work, generally we try to keep it within a $350,000 request limit. But we had someone come in and they were like, hey, mine's $360,000. Can I apply for this, or do I have to rework my entire budget to make it work? And we were just like, that's okay. So generally, if it's a little bit over that threshold, we do not mind. It will be reviewed on a project-by-project basis. We may require more documentation, especially if it's, let's say, $400,000. But again, we're not going to make you rewrite your whole application and budget if it's a little bit over that 350 threshold. For our trail work, we do require public access, and it has to be on open and designated OHV routes. So something that we found out is that if things are over 50 years old, so pretty much if you're like, hey, this trail hasn't been touched, it hasn't had any work done to it in over 50 years, it's going to require a cultural analysis. And it might even require an environmental evaluation if it's on federal land. So again, with those things, it's just kind of some extra steps that our applicants need to take, but we don't want to hinder our application. So if you have funding requests like that and things pop up, we can allow and pay for those. So keep that in mind. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, myself, or my staff. They're usually pretty good at helping or pushing things along to make sure that things are answered properly. So if you have a funding request, you can include your environmental evaluation and cultural analysis in the funding request. And then lastly, for trail work, we do require landowner approval for trail work projects, especially if you're not the land manager. So if you're a nonprofit and you're working on federal land, we want to make sure that there's been that communication and that you're not just kind of being like, hey, I'm going to show up and do this, and then it gets pretty much, they tell you to stop. So keep that in mind. For access, protection, and education, we do have that $350,000 asterisk there. We do allow for more requests, but it will be reviewed on a project-by-project basis. So for access protection, again, this is for protecting land. It is for making sure that access is going to be still in place for OHV users. So with this, we do request that you work with PLPCO. This is our Public Lands Policy Coordination Office. They are within our Department of Natural Resources. We are requiring that you work with them so that we're not doubling up on work. Also, there's some things that we are unable to do with this grant that they have the ability to do, such as litigation. So again, if you are applying for access protection, we want to make sure that you are working with them so that you're communicating with them and that you're not doubling up on the work. So if it's something that they're already aware of, they're working on their own, it's not that you're applying for funding in potentially both areas. So for education, we want to see examples of material as well as a measure for effectiveness. We want to know who your audience is, why they're your audience, those kind of things. For search and rescue, it has a lower threshold just because of our asks. Also, we do not allow any requests over $150,000. Again, that's just because of our limitation with funding and the competitiveness of the category. So we do require historical data for past search and rescue calls. Also, your matching funds must reflect the percentage of OHV search and rescue usage. That kind of goes back to, we want to make sure if you're buying a side-by-side and it's going to be 50% used for OHV calls and 50% used for non-motorized rescue calls, that your match is 50%. So as for our next 3 categories, we have snowmobile, OHV tourism, and our land acquisition. For snowmobile, it does have that $150,000 threshold. That's just due to funding limitations. This is our first cycle that we will have snowmobiles. We don't really know how much our requests will be. Also, similar to search and rescue, if a project is more winter-focused and is not solely snowmobile related, the project's matching funds should reflect this. So like, let's say you want to purchase a groomer, and the groomer is going to mostly groom snowmobile trails, but there are some, some snowshoeing trails and those kind of things in there, or backcountry skiers access the same trails. We kind of wanted some statistics, and if 75% of the users will be snowmobile users, that's fine. We want to make sure that your percent match is 25%. And then very similar, which I pretty much just explained, if a project is related to snowmobile search and rescue, please apply for the category you see fit. That's more so because we are going to have snowmobile search and rescue. So really, it's up to the applicant to decide which one it's going to most predominantly fit under, and decide which one you should apply for. For OHV Tourism, we have a lot less funding, so it goes only up to $15,000. With this grant, with this category, we do have more limitations on it. So administrative costs are not an eligible match. Applicants cannot use the Office of Tourism grant as matching funds, and then applicants must provide at least a 25% cash match. So if you do have questions regarding this, sorry. I'm just answering Mark Smoot, Bear Lake Valley Chamber of Commerce question. Where would a grant request for grooming equipment for non-motorized trails fit? So that is a great question. It could partially fit into our non-motorized RTP grant, which Caroline will be talking about. But when it comes to larger equipment, I do not believe UORG, it can possibly be funded by UORG. So Mark, it can kind of be partially funded by different grants within our division, but there's not one predominant grant that you can apply for when it comes to non-motorized. This could change if we see that non-motorized users have to kind of pay to play. So that could change in the future. But as of right now, it would mostly be split between multiple grants. I hope that answers your question. Feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions, Mark. Thank you. Okay. As for our land acquisition, we have a threshold of $10,000 to $1 million. This does require some more information. We want to know the current land acquisition status, explanation of ownership and title fees. It also requires an appraisal report. Again, this will be open beginning February 1st, and then it will be open year-round, so you can apply at any time. And we're doing that so that if something pops up and you want to make that purchase, you don't have to go and wait for a cycle for it. So this, again, will be live February 1st. And it'll have a much shorter application and a little bit more detailed attachments of what we'll need. But that should be opening soon. All right, and then so just some examples of past funded projects. So the first one, this is actually a land acquisition one before it was even in place. This is the Beaver Main Street Trailhead. It creates additional trailhead parking and connectivity within the community. This one I wanted to put it there because it actually came from a nonprofit, and they matched 100%, well, sorry, not 100%, but they matched, their match was composed 100% of cash from their own entity. They're actually deeding this over to the land after it's, they're deeding the land over to the county after it's done. So I just thought that was a unique one. You can actually see this, they're still working on it. We went by when we were in Beaver to kind of see what's been going on. Right now they're putting up a fence and they're putting up signage and kiosks. So again, that's kind of a land acquisition one, so purchasing something on Main Street for trailhead parking. The next one was a search and rescue Argo. It came from Grand County. It actually focused on multiple search and rescue situations. So it was for land, it was for mud search and rescue calls, water search and rescue calls, sand dunes, and snow search and rescue calls. So again, kind of diversifying the search and rescue situations. Our third one is the Tread Lightly Ethics and Safety Education Campaign. It came from Sand Hollow State Park, but they also worked for Hunt for Prizes, they worked with Tread Lightly, and then they worked with another entity. So pretty much it was just community partnerships to support and promote OHV education and usage in a fun and versatile way, because this is more so child-based. So the best way to educate OHV users is when they're from a young age. And then lastly, this is an example of a snowmobile grant. It's our Avalanche Beacon Checkpoint and Warming Hut repairs. This is actually an RTP grant, but it's a multi-use project that focuses on avalanche preparedness. So this is motorized and non-motorized. So that's when that kind of percent match comes into play. And then, so here are some eligible matching funds and ineligible matching funds. Obviously, cash can include grants, donations, those kind of things. In-kind is volunteer hours, employee hours, donated goods and equipment, donated land, donated skilled labor. Some ineligible matching funds is fringe benefits. That's really what it plays into the employee hours. And then also something that we've been seeing is we want to make sure that we're not paying for, when we're paying for employees, when we're using matching funds for employees, that we're not paying or getting matched from like meals and those kind of things, because it does kind of just muddy the water. And then items that are not included on applicant's approved budget, unauthorized discounts or reduced costs, and then any matches that took place before a contract was in place. So the ineligible matching funds, those mostly come into play when you're doing your closeout. We will have more of a descriptive list on our budget sheet showing eligible and ineligible matching funds and eligible and ineligible requests. And then I won't go through all of these, but I will highlight the ones that are most important. So pretty much when it comes to our application, the ones that are required, and then the ones that are if applicable. So I will just talk about a couple of these. The main one that I like to focus on is a detailed budget spreadsheet. You want to make sure it's detailed. You are required to use our budget spreadsheet. We will have examples of those. I believe we're also probably going to work on a webinar on how to go through the budget and how it works and whatnot. So if you do have questions about the budget, we're likely going to be working on that as well. So when it comes to a detailed budget spreadsheet, it is required. We have not approved applications because we received a budget and they were asking the full funding amount, and their budget, it literally just said search and rescue. That was it. And they were asking, at the time, $350,000. We did not accept that because it was not detailed enough. There's nothing for us to report on. So again, please keep that in mind. If you have questions, reach out to me. Something new that we're doing is we are requiring 2 bids for items over $5,000. So if you are trying to purchase equipment or larger items, we want to see bids. We want to make sure that you've kind of done the backup work for things and that you're not just pulling numbers out of thin air. Also, we want to make sure that our grant is being recognized. This is important to us. For me, whenever I go out on a trail and I see a UR grant, I know right off the bat because they have that signage there. We want to make sure that this grant is being recognized in the same way. And then lastly, we do require 2 letters of support from 2 letters of support. They should not come from the applicant themselves. They should come from either partners that are involved with it, people within the community. Pretty much, let's say if it's a tourism one, we want to kind of see it come from their tourism section within the county, those kind of things. So if you're struggling with this, please reach out to me. And then again, all the other side is just kind of if applicable, and those kind of things. We'll have more information on our application regarding this. Okay. So with this grant, we actually within our division have an OHV trail crew. So let's say you have a project and you're not going to be able to get volunteers. We have a resource within our division that you can use. We have an OHV trail crew. So pretty much what they do, right now they are in the office and they are kind of working on planning out the rest of 2023, where they're going to be, those kind of things. But honestly, they're young, they have knowledge and training and heavy equipment. So if you're working on an OHV trail project, even if it didn't come from funding from this grant, we can help you. So we recommend that you reach out to Jaden for any questions regarding that, or if you have a project that you want to work on, you're applying for funding, you need some extra help on it, please reach out to Jaden. Everyone that I've spoken to loves them. Also, they like to camp, so you don't have to put them up in any housing or anything. They just go out and camp. And then lastly, applications are going to be online. They're going to be very similar to all of the other grants within this division. But we do have an early review process. So if you submit your application early, 2 weeks in advance, I will go through and review and make recommendations on your application. I'll mostly just check over that your budget is accurate and that kind of your project abstract and there's explanation of what's going on within your project, that there's not really any loose ends. Everything's kind of tied up in a nice little bow. I will not write your application, but again, I will go through and make recommendations. And then also, we like to think that we have an easy and straightforward application. You only fill out the category that your project falls under. So if you go through and you check every single category when applying, you're going to have to fill out the entire application. But if you only click on one category that your project pertains to, you only have to fill out that section, and it's a much shorter application. So keep that in mind when you're applying. And then some things to consider. No work can take place before a contract is in place. Kind of what I stated a little bit earlier is like this grant cannot fund law enforcement, swag items, clothing, insurance, food, water, fuel, etc. there'll be more information on the application of what it cannot fund. But for the most part, thinking about this is we want to make sure that it is helping the OHV community as a whole. It's not just one specialized area. So again, these are why these things are kind of limiting and unable to fund. And then please keep in mind, if any large equipment or items are purchased, they must be retained and used for their intended purpose for at least 10 years. We are right now working on something so that if you do receive an item and you're like, hey, this benefited us for, 5 years. We're not going to use it anymore. We want to sell it. What are our options? We're working through that right now because we don't want to be like, hey, you have to keep this equipment and it's going to go just collect dust. We don't want to do that. So again, we're working through this. So if there's any questions about that, stay tuned. We'll have answers. But again, we want to make sure that the equipment's being used. It's not being purchased for one project and then it's being resold and it's being benefiting the applicant and they're making money off of it. Again, we want to make sure that that's not happening. So this is why this is being put in place. And then lastly, this is my last slide. So pretty much all the way from submission to award, this is generally about a month and a half, max 2 months. So again, the over grant is open for 2 months. It closes at 5 p.m. As I stated earlier, dates are subject to change based on holidays and weekends. But pretty much when the submission closes, it immediately goes to our OHV Advisory Council. They are volunteers of the state, so pretty much they review the proposals, they make recommendations, and then afterwards, pretty much they make recommendations on their own. They go through, score it, make comments, reach out, talk about things, and then they all get together and they review it, discuss things, and have a final score. And then, so their final scores are just the recommendations, and it actually goes on, the recommendations receive a final approval by our DNR's executive director and division director. So generally, from submission to all the way to approval is about a month and a half, and then awards go out, you receive notification in 1 to 2 business days. So again, month and a half, 2 months max. This is my last slide before I give the microphone over to Caroline. Are there any questions from our participants online? All right, I am not seeing anything popping up. I will pass this on to Caroline. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks, Rachel and Patrick, and thanks to you all for bearing with us. It's about an hour in, and in our in-person presentations, this is when I would say, okay, get up, take a drink, come on, stretch your legs. I'm hoping that people are out on the chairlifts or relaxing at home on a nice couch right now, so you don't need a break, and we'll just power through this. But, okay, I'm Caroline, and I manage the Recreational Trails Program. So we'll get that slide up. So the Recreational Trails Program, a little bit different than UORG and the OHV grant because it is a federal grant. So although it does do the similar things in terms of it's a matching grant to develop outdoor infrastructure for trails specifically, there's a few little caveats that we'll go through and touch base on just because it is a federal funded program. So there's a little bit of caveats we have to touch through. But I just wanted to put these 2 pictures up to get us started, just to get your brains going. But the first picture on the top, obviously just your basic bike trail through a city or various areas paved. This program goes for motorized, non-motorized, paved, non-paved, single tracks. I mean, you name it, if it's a trail, this program can fund it. And then the one on the bottom, to get you thinking a little bit more creatively, water trails, for example, can be a trail or a vertical route. We talked about the Salt Lake Climbers work with working on vertical routes, vertical trails. That would be included in this program as well. So we'll touch on more of the options for this, but that's just some ideas to get your brains going. Okay, eligible project items. So obviously the construction of new recreational trails, very similar to the UORG. If you're building out a trail and need some funding, this is a great opportunity. Also similar to the RRI, maintenance and restoration of trails that you already have in place, this can be used for that as well. If you're going to be making trail side, trail heads, some kiosks, some signages, trail linkages between trails that have already been put in place, this can be used as well. We had a question about grooming equipment. This can be used to purchase equipment for non-motorized or motorized trails. We'll touch base a little bit more about the issues we sometimes have with that with the Buy America Act, but if you are looking to purchase equipment, this can go towards that. If you're looking to purchase land, titles, or easements for projects, this also works, so that's a little bit different than the UORG because you can actually purchase land. You cannot use this to just purchase land, but you can use it to purchase land that then you are going to build a trail on. And then 5% of our funding annually can go towards education projects. So if you're going to be doing some sort of safety or environmental protection project, you can use funding for that as well. Two pictures I wanted to put up on this slide. The one on the left is up at Cardiff Pass. If you've been up there recently, it's covered in snow right now, but Salt Lake County is doing a fantastic project putting in a boardwalk over this kind of riparian area. If you've been up there before, this is a very popular trailhead to access Donut Falls, and people normally take the road up into the trailhead or drive their cars up into it, and it's pretty crowded up there. So this is a great opportunity to get people to park at that large parking lot off the highway, use this boardwalk to get to the trailhead. And then the one on the right is up at Bryan Head Resort. And they've been doing some projects to connect kind of resorts to the mountains with bike trails to make it easier for vacationers to get quick, easy access from, say, hotel to trail. Okay, sorry, this is a question from Hannah. Can you use this to purchase land that another entity will then be building trail on, but your organization will not? Good question. I would say yes. Partnerships are just key in all of these grants. So if you're going to be somebody that's putting forth the application to, say, purchase the land, and then you have somebody else coming in to build, and it's under one project scope, you can go ahead with that, but the project timeline does need to be in the same timeline, right, in our 2-year contracts. You can't purchase the land and say, oh, in a couple years someone's going to build, but having be integrated in the same project. So, good question. Okay, again, going over trail types. So we had somebody, we had down in Panguitch, in that area, not Emery County, excuse me, put in a paved bike path up through Red Canyon. And this is a cool project because they used RTP funding, UORG funding, and RRI funding. So we'll talk a little bit later on about braiding your grants and getting funding from multiple pots. But this was a great example because the RTP and the UORG can match, so you can match their funding there. And then after a few years, this trail actually had some deterioration and damage from weathering, so they used the RRI to fix some of the trail. The one below, again, Salt Lake Climbers Alliance, they've done the same thing with RTP and UORG and matching those grants. The one on the upper right-hand corner is an example project from the Utah Avalanche Center, which does fantastic work. They do a lot of education projects with us, but this one was an example of putting up these beeping, are you beeping signs? So we'll touch base on NEPA as well, but if you're gonna be doing something similar to this, where you're just putting in a simple kiosk, something very small, you obviously don't need to be doing an environmental clearance for something so minimal. Otherwise, you do need to go through environmental clearances, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. And then again, an example on the bottom right, larger machinery moving rocks and big debris for, say, a motorized trail. Okay, so let's talk about money. I've mentioned this a couple times. We want you to know that you can match all these funding sources with one another. So braid your grants together. If you have a small pot of funding from your organization and you're trying to go after big money, use the UORG with the RTP, with the ORI, with the OHV. Like, you can go after all of them. And it's great because they all are housed under one division now. So we're all aware. We sit all within the same office space, and we know who's applying for what. So we can be in cahoots of who's going after what. This award's up to $150,000, so it's not as big of an ask, say, as UORG or OHV, but again, the leverage capability with this funding is where it's really great. Okay, what do you mean by river as a trail? Good question. We've never seen a river trail come through as an application, so I keep plugging it in hopes that we might one day, but I would say something like the Helper River, for an example. They've done some great revitalization work on the river itself, so removing, dams or spillovers, something like that, to actually make it a recreational trail. The Ogden River Kayak Park would be another example where you're actually making the river an accessible recreation area and not just a stream bed. So if you have more questions specifically about, hey, we're putting maybe a trail next to the river or not quite in the river, talk to me and we can work through some things, because it would be exciting to see that type of application come through. Okay, new this year, if you've applied to RTP in the past, you've seen a 50% required match. And similar to UORG, we're reducing matches this year for RTP as well. The federal requirement is only 20%, so we're going to comply with that. So you only need to put in 20% for RTP this year. So even if you're going after $150,000, the largest ask, you as your organization needs to only put in $30,000. Oh, thank you, Betsy. That's awesome. Betsy Byrne is a fantastic resource. Okay, so talking about access points. Thank you, Tara. Okay, great. Good comments, everybody. Thank you. Okay, and then, like I've said previously, motorized and non-motorized. This can be applicable to both funding sources. We do have more money, I would say, usually available in the motorized category. Not more money, just more opportunities, because it's not as competitive. So let's say you're doing a bike path that has e-bikes. That is considered motorized. So use the application for the motorized RTP for this one if you're going to be doing something regarding e-bikes. And again, these are scored by 2 separate committees. We have people focused on the motorized section and people focused on the non-motorized section. So you're not competing against those applications. You're competing motorized versus motorized, non-motorized versus non-motorized. When creating campsites along a river to facilitate multi-day river trips count. Not necessarily within the RTP, I wouldn't say. I would say that would fall more under the UORG category to do campsites specifically. That's a great idea and thinking outside the box, but the campsites, the actual campsites wouldn't be able to be funded with RTP funding. Okay. Perfect. Okay, everyone's favorite 4-letter word, NEPA. So again, due to the federal nature of this funding, regardless of land management, if it's federal, if it's state, if it's city, if it's private, you do have to go through the NEPA process. So it can be a little bit of a burden, a little bit of an extra lift, I know, but it is so imperative. If you're doing new work, if you're doing old work, if you're doing work at all with federal money, you need to go through the NEPA process. So that includes environmental and cultural assessments. And we've got great connections with UDOT and environmental contracting agencies. We can hook you up with the right people to do this if it's kind of a new thing for you. I know it can be a little bit daunting, but it does need to be done. The good news is that RTP can fund your NEPA process, and that's up to 18 months prior to your contract date. We've kind of honed in on you cannot have work that's taken place prior to your contract date be funded with your application, but this is the one exception. So if you've had a NEPA done last year and you get awarded this year, you can go ahead and use that for your project as long as it is within the scope of your application. Once again, similar to purchasing land, you cannot use this just to purchase a NEPA clearance, but it can be part of your application. So my suggestion is just get NEPA done early, get out there and start doing it. We would definitely encourage people to have NEPA done before their applications are put in place or applied for. The scoring committee does like to see that as soon as they're awarded funding, they can go forth and start work. But we do have people that are still working on NEPA from this previous year cycle. So we'll work with you on that. Just know that you're way more competitive if you can say, as soon as we get the go-ahead, we're done. We don't have to wait on any environmental clearances. If we've already been awarded an RTP grant without NEPA clearance, do we still need to do it? Without NEPA clearance, I guess just meaning, was it not required because it was an education project, or was it a small, changing to the area? If you have gotten an RTP without NEPA clearance, we can dive into it a little bit more, but you have to do NEPA if the project scope requires it, if that answers your question. And Eric, we can talk more about it. Okay, again, covering matching. There were any more questions about NEPA? I know that's kind of a big topic for everyone. And I will plug, we're going to be doing a NEPA webinar with some great environmental engineers and managers in February. So look out for the emails. We've been blasting those, and I think it should have been on an email. If you signed up for this one, you'll likely get the sign up for the next one. So it's a tricky thing, and we're trying to make it as simple as we can. I know we're still learning about it, so hopefully that will be helpful to you guys, is getting a little bit more insight on how that NEPA process works. Okay. Matching requirements, once again, you can use state funds, you can use our grants, you can use your local funds if you've got bonds, private donations, funds, doing fundraisers, the value of donated land for acquisition projects, and other federal funds. Okay, this was, again, touching on the purchasing of equipment for non-motorized trails. The Buy a Merit certificate kind of throws a wrench in some people's plans, and that's where we do have great resources with the UORG or the OHV program. If you're looking to buy machinery with the RTP, you do have to make sure that it was purchased and made within America. The steel in that equipment needs to be purchased and made in America. And there's actually some changes going on right now that includes more than just the steel. It includes pretty much all resources using projects. And so we're really hopeful that that's actually going to be diminished completely, and this will go away. Right now, though, you still need to make sure that your machinery is purchased within the United States. So if you are finding something that's more expensive than $2,500, you can use $2,500 to go towards machinery of non-American purchases, but that's the max for $2,500. Please share NEPA webinar information here. Yes, we will do that. Thank you, Rachel. We'll put links, and we'll make sure we have all these links accessible to you afterwards as well. But okay, great. Okay, this is a timeline for RTP. Again, I hope you can see that we're trying to make this concise, that you have all your applications due at the beginning of the year about. So we're getting ready to do that and making applications happen right now. The RTP opens February 15th and closes May 5th. April 14th, you can work with me before then to get a staff review. Then we'll have a scoring meeting in May. Due to the federal nature of this funding, once again, we have to send our recommendations to the Federal Highway Administration. So you won't get your contract probably until September. And so you have a little bit of this waiting timeline where, like, we say yes, we know you're going to get it, but we have to have the final go-ahead. And that doesn't happen until September. We want to be in the loop with all of your projects, so 6-month progress reports should be submitted. We're working to get those uploaded in Salesforce, but for now, you can email me. Again, these are 24-month contracts, and then once you're finished, you'll email me. I know we have some applicants online, and hopefully we've made that pretty easy, that we send you a packet and then you fill it out. Please remember to be keeping documentation of all of your receipts, your spending, anything that's showing that you're spending money needs to be documented and returned back to us. That's a problem we usually have, is people send an invoice, but we need to make sure the invoice has been paid. So please make sure that you're sending that when you reimburse yourselves. Okay, and then at the end, we just want to schedule a site visit, come and see the great work that you've done. That's the best part of our job, is coming and promoting what you've done. And then one last slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a bigger picture of, okay, there's all these programs, how can I use them? For example, if you have a $100,000 project, use RTP for $40,000 worth. You only have to match that with 20%, and then match that with UORG or OHV. And based on your county, you might have a reduced matched as well. The applicant puts in $10,000 of cash or in kind, and then you've leveraged, a $100,000 project with maybe $10,000 of your own cash from the applicant. So we just want to make you aware that there's big money out there, and this is just within our division. There's money from UDOT and various other resources to get your small dollars doing big things. So, okay, I know that was a lot. Does anyone have questions on RTP before Carly brings us home? Those are great questions, so thanks everybody for being active. So, and our email and our resources and all the ways to reach out are here if you have more in-depth questions. But with that, we'll turn it to Carly.
All right. Hi, everyone. I wish we could see you in person, but a virtual webinar is great too. I saw a couple familiar names in the attendee list, so hello to the Cache County folks that I know. Allison, I saw your name, and Mark Smoot. It's nice to see you. Well, not see you, but nice to know you're on the other end of this. So anyways, my name's Carly Lanch. I just joined the Division of Outdoor Recreation back in August of last year. And so previously I was on your end of the webinar, writing grants and trying to absorb all this information as the trail planner for Cache County. So I can sympathize and know kind of what is intimidating and some of the questions that you might be coming across. So anyways, I'm the last to present today, and not only am I the last, I also say I am the least. Unlike the others that I've presented here, I am here to just talk about a new planning assistance program that we are developing and kicking off this year, actually a week from today. So it's pretty exciting. But unlike the grants that we are offering, this technical assistance program is basically offering time and planning support. So this program will be open to municipalities, counties, and tribal governments. And if you are, say, a nonprofit or a land manager and you don't fall into that specific category, we could still work with you. But we just want to ensure that we're working with the political subdivisions of the state. So just make sure that your county or municipality or local tribe is involved. But without further ado, I will dive into some of the ORPA details. So let's start here. Okay, so there's two main ways that we'll be able to support you. I'll talk about this first, and then I'll go into the second. So for bigger projects, we are requiring a small application. And to give you an example of how we can support and what these projects might look like, before you do all the groundwork for even to be able to submit an application, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And a lot of that can look like getting all the right stakeholders in the room and getting your community bought in and excited and energized about a vision. So we can help you kind of corral your community in a way. Get all the different stakeholders, the land managers, the tribal governments, the utility corridor, or the UDOT, whomever it is, all in the same room to talk about what the future of outdoor recreation in your area could look like, what's possible, what soils are best, where is there sensitive habitat, things like that, to help you shape a plan for your future with outdoor recreation. So we can help you. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is in Richmond, which is up in Cache County, and we're doing a trails master plan with them. So we can help you with plan coordination and development and giving you a document essentially at the end of our project that will help you know which grants to apply to, how kind of strategize a good approach for timing. Maybe you're looking at other grants that aren't offered by the division, and just our favorite term, I think, as our grants and planning team is grant braiding. So just making sure that all of those pieces are able to be matched and leveraged with each other and really maximize the investment that your community is willing to put into outdoor recreation. So sometimes when you're the local champion, I always like to say that you could be the person that people are throwing tomatoes at in a room at a city hall or town hall meeting. So we can help you kind of curb that energy and try to have productive conversations where we structure it so the public can provide input, people that are representing the land management agency have a civil and productive dialogue to help really shape again the future of how you want outdoor recreation to look like in your community. So I'll jump to the next one, which is trail counter deployment and visitor analysis. We have a whole slew of trail counters up in our division, and we can help you deploy them and look at how access could be improved, or maybe help you anticipate the growth of outdoor, how many visitors you anticipate seeing in the future. I always use the example from Mendon, which is again up in Cache County, where one of the most beloved single track loops in the area was shut down because of COVID and just so many visitors in the area and locals getting out to recreate during the pandemic that it really degraded the road and the parking area. It impacted people's crops, actually, because of so much dust that was being kicked up on the side of the road. And so you never know what kind of externalities or impacts recreation might have. So getting a good kind of a finger on the pulse of what the usage is now can help you paint a picture for how to be strategic in the future. So we can help you look at that. Again, all of this is just to help you really have a good plan of action to go after our grants and make sure that you've done the necessary groundwork to have your project roll out smoothly. You know, you've asked the difficult questions before you've entered into a contract with us, and just help you have the confidence in your community that this is the right path forward for a project. So we can help you a little bit with capturing some of those, data points or kind of observing what the terrain that you're working with is like, and thinking about, how could a trail system work here? But again, you are all the experts in your area, so and where you live. So we just want to help build capacity at the local level and help you be in control of your recreation future. So this is the kind of the application-based projects. Actually, a week from today is when we'll be opening it up. It'll be a pretty simple application, so just reach out to me before or during the application window, and we can think through what you're wanting to accomplish in your community together. So again, I should say there was an asterisk on the previous slide, but this is not intended to replace consulting services. More so, we're trying to help you kind of empower your local community and take the reins in your recreation future. So we can help build capacity to projects where you have consultants on board. And to copy something that Betsy Burns, who's on this call from the Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program, which I'll talk about in a second, she always says, we can match the energy that you put in. And I think that's a really great way to look at this. Because we can't go in and do everything for you, but we can help you and match kind of the energy that you can put into these types of projects. So are there any questions in the chat at all? Not seeing anything, so I'll keep going, but feel free to interrupt anytime. Okay, so the second way that we can support you, we're calling these mini consultations, but really just reach out at any point. We are doing applications for the bigger projects, so we can manage our time and give you a good kind of final deliverable, so to speak. But mini consultations, just reach out. Let's brainstorm together. Maybe do a site visit or just maybe connect you to other resources, or maybe you just need to think out loud. And so we are here for that. So please reach out anytime to set up a meeting with me. Happy to kick around ideas. And, we've talked about a whole slew of grants that you can braid together in our office, but there are tons of resources and tons of funding opportunities, even outside of our what we're offering, that we can help you think through and see if we can pair things together. All right, so do you have recommendations for the best type of funding that might help start a community-based, recreation-focused nonprofit? That is a great question. There's a lot of private foundations and grant opportunities that might fit the need that you're looking for. Not necessarily any of our grants, because they're more so infrastructure education-based, but it might be worth reaching out to. Again, I keep plugging Betsy and Brandon with the RTCA, but they can help kind of in the community partnership side and help you figure out a strategy there. Is there a specific way the ORPA can complement the NEPA process? That's a great question. I have not had that question yet before in all of our workshops. I would say, we can help you think through and do some of the groundwork to help flesh out maybe how much NEPA will have to be done if it's on federal soil. Maybe we're working in an area where you could go through a categorical exclusion and not necessarily go through a full environmental analysis or assessment. So we could potentially complement in that way, but ORPA would not replace NEPA at all, and that's kind of the specializing in each kind of ology, so to speak. So not necessarily, but yeah, Alex and Aaron, if I didn't answer your questions, feel free to shoot me an email and we can talk more. All right. Well, again, mini consultations are just rolling. Reach out anytime. Happy to meet. Come to your community even when it makes sense, or hop on a video call at any time. So we're here to be a resource, and you know, if there's questions that you're having, you're probably not alone. I think throughout the whole state, people are kind of having the same types of questions. So if you have a question and I don't have the answer offhand, you know, maybe we can go do some digging and figure out information or a resource that would not just help you, but other folks throughout the state. All right, no other questions so far. So again, just please reach out anytime. Really happy to get together and meet, and looking forward to working with some of you. So I mentioned earlier that I would give a plug for the Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program, the RTCA. And we've got Betsy who's in the chat. You could potentially connect with her. But the reason why the state wanted to create ORPA is because of the fantastic work that the RTCA program does throughout the country. And basically, this program, they work anywhere but in a national park. They work with community partners, nonprofits, cities, counties, tribes, you name it, with the hopes of, you know, increasing conservation areas and access to outdoor recreation and learning opportunities and things like that. So they've done a lot of great work throughout the state and the whole Intermountain region. They're we're kind of mimicking the work that they're doing nationally and locally with our Utah version. So we're really trying to kind of just build extra capacity and complement the work that RTCA is already doing in the state. So here are some of their core pillars, you know, parks, trails, conserving lands, outdoor recreation. The fourth one down is the strengthening the organizational capacity of project partners. So Aaron, or Alex, you mentioned that your question, that would be a good thing to think through, is you know, building those partnerships, and they can work with nonprofits a lot. So, and if you wanted to connect or work with your national park, that would be a good avenue as well. So you can see here that they have a somewhat similar application window to what we are doing. This is our first year with ORPA. And so we're trying to see if, you know, there's a way that we can scope out projects together or just kind of complement each other. And this is our first year doing so. So keep that in mind. But here's their application deadline. All of this is available on their website. We've got a Google Drive with all of the resources too, so you can find that as well. And in the meantime, reach out to Betsy and Brandon. They're both locals to Utah and really just wonderful folks. So again, ORPA, which I was talking about earlier, we're really just wanting to complement this program and make a kind of a local version of it. So, Betsy's got the website in the chat. There you go. Okay, so switching gears a little bit from all the planning talk, but this is one other grant opportunity that is now housed within the Division of Outdoor Recreation. This used to be within state parks, but since we've gone through kind of our merger and split, it's now coming in to be managed by the Division of Outdoor Recreation. So we're actually in the process of hiring someone, and the application is live for managing this program, and it'll be a really great position. But we're really excited to take this program over and help build it out. So there's so Patrick mentioned earlier with UORG that a lot of the grants or the projects that UORG and RTP can fund are really outdoor recreation based or trail based and things like that. But this grant can fund a lot of park infrastructure and things that might not be eligible for UORG. So that's something to consider. This is a national program that we work to administer with the Park Service. So it does have some federal stipulations and requirements such as NEPA. Another thing that's important to consider for this grant is that there is a perpetuity requirement. So basically it just needs to be accessible to, for public use forever. So we're opening up the grant cycle just about a month, February 1st through April 28th. If you have questions about this opportunity in the meantime, you can reach out to me or Maureen Casper or any of our staff. And this is open for local governments, counties, cities, tribes, and state agencies. So it's a 1-to-1 match. It's a 2-phase application process, which we can share more information with you about offline if you email us. And it's an excellent opportunity. There's I think $12 million available this year in this pot of money. So it's a good opportunity for some of those bigger projects. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm not seeing any questions right now, but what's the best way to make contact with UORG in order to coordinate our project with your office before the grant is submitted? Good question, Lyle. You can reach out to any of our staff. Patrick Morrison, who spoke first. He is a great resource. You can reach out to any of us. Am I limited to how many projects can be submitted? From Abby. No, you are not limited on how many applications you can submit for really any of our grants, but just be mindful about being strategic with your ask and making sure that, in the off chance that you're awarded every single grant that you request, that you can manage the project and carry it through to break ground, and just be thinking about, if I ask for this much out of this pot, as well as this much out of the same pot, are those projects competing against each other? So I'm happy to kick around ideas with you if you want to brainstorm together. So just reach out, Abby. And Lyle, I hope that answered your question. All right, awesome. So again, this is the last grant that we're talking about today, and we'll have more information about the 2-phase application process and more details on our website. Are there any other grants available, such as replacing outdated playground equipment? That's a great question. Tara's already got that. LWCF can help. Potentially the Recreation Restoration Infrastructure Grant, the RRI, if there's an outdoor recreation kind of an element, not necessarily standard park equipment or playground equipment. But yeah, LWCF would be a great option for that. Good question. You're welcome. Thanks for joining the webinar, Lyle. Awesome. Okay. So, common mistakes, things to watch out for. We've got advisory committees that will review all of the applications. So you really want to just help make the case for why your project is so wonderful and needs funding. So really make the sell that it's outdoor recreation related. If it's a paved trail, we help fund paved trails often, but really focus maybe not on the active transportation side, but make your case the recreation aspect and really sell it that way. The devil's in the details, and we love just making sure that we can see as many details as we can. So be really thorough and add as much information as possible. One thing that I sometimes recommend to communities, and Patrick hit on this as well, is sometimes you go through the whole application process and filling it out, and then you realize that your project really isn't quite ready to put into action and make it happen in the 2-year or 24-month contract period. So make sure that your project's really ripe, ready. You've done all the stakeholder buy-in. You've answered all those hard questions before you apply. We also have a lot of tourism dollars that help create UORG and the regional asset tier opportunities. So make the case for the tourism piece. Maybe it'll help benefit a couple local businesses. Really just sell the story, paint a narrative, and talk about what tourism might look like in your area, even beyond the heads and beds way that people typically talk about tourism. So one thing, Caroline mentioned that we love to see partnerships, but really make it clear who's applying and who's responsible for what in your application. Sometimes it can be confusing if there's 3 different project partners, but it's not really clear who's the primary or who's taking the lead or who we should even talk to about updates on the grant itself. So just make sure that it's all there and all the kind of roles and responsibilities are outlined. And applying to the wrong grant, we have a ton of opportunities, as you may feel a little bit overwhelmed by now at the end of this webinar. But just reach out to any of us. We are super happy to clarify. With the OHV Recreation Grant, there's a ton of different categories. So just reach out to Rachel and she'll be able to help you. Okay, so here's some secrets of success. Spend time thinking about how your project will meet a need in your area. Are there congestion issues? Is there a concentration of people somewhere and not a lot of people elsewhere, and you want to kind of distribute that, recreation impact, or how many people are recreating? Really tell us how it's going to benefit the area, and kind of be creative in thinking about how it'll solve maybe a problem that doesn't even exist yet, but you foresee happening. Stay local. We work with our DMOs, our destination marketing organizations. So reach out to your tourism folks. They are super happy to help write letters of support, or maybe they know a different partner that could help benefit your area. We love to see events, no matter how big or how small, even if it's a local, Boy Scouts or a NICA mountain bike team or your equestrian groups that are going to benefit locally. Tell us about it. And even if you have big aspirations for a big regional event, tell us about that too. It really makes the case for why the project and the infrastructure is needed. We love to see partnerships. So work with your land manager, work with your local businesses, you name it. There's partnerships in places where you might not anticipate, and it's worth barking up the tree to see if it's possible. Partnerships make projects strong too. Maybe a staff person that was the lead at one agency leaves, and then there's other people to kind of help catch pieces and keep projects moving forward. So we love to see partners. Again, there's so many grants. Just make sure you reach out to us and kind of know what you're getting into, and know kind of generally which grant you're applying for. And reach out to us. We can help connect you to resources or experts to help make your project even better before you even apply. So we love to talk. All of us are email, call us anytime. Okay, so a couple things that I learned from when I was on your end of things. Sometimes Salesforce, which is what we use for the actual submitting of applications, sometimes it can get a little wonky or crash when there's high volume on the website at those final deadline days. So just make sure that you're working in a Google Doc or a Word doc, or make sure you're putting your application together offline. And proofread, spell check. We're all a little bit more lenient on, or reliant, I should say, on spell check than we want to admit. But the red squiggly line can be really helpful to make sure that your application's doesn't have glaring errors. So just proofread it, get someone else to read it. That can be really helpful. Start early. Sometimes you even go through the application process and you have most of your application and you say, we've got a couple details we need to iron out. And you come back the next year to go after. And that's a perfectly okay way to approach a project. But if you start early, you'll be able to help yourself figure out what those questions are ahead of time. So, when you submit your grant, you've submitted it, it's done. So just do all your work prior to. And again, reach out to us. We're happy to help. And again, I kind of hit on this next one, which is the use correct language. You know, sometimes people on the review committee may say, okay, well, this project is a sidewalk project, or, you know, it's a paved trail, but why is it outdoor recreation? And why didn't they go after this other funding that's available elsewhere from UDOT or whomever to make this project happen? So just really make that case for outdoor recreation in your application. That'll help it go further with our review committees. And then lastly, letters of support can really, really help shape your project and make it really strong. I've done this in the past when I've applied for funding, where I've sent out kind of a boilerplate letter, and I send it to a partnering organization or someone that I think in the community would support the project. And I say, hey, could you put your letterhead and your signature here, tweak it if you can, but just get it back to me if you can't. And so, you know, the application ends up being submitted with a bunch of the same letters of support, which is okay, but, you know, these are kind of somewhat competitive grants sometimes. So just help give the folks that are going to write a letter of support time so that they can add their extra flair or kind of flavor, so to speak, to the letter, and just really help you shape the narrative for why it's important to them and how they'll uniquely benefit from this project, or the community will benefit. So yeah, give people bullet points maybe, and ask them to get creative with the letter. Okay, with that, yeah, please reach out if you have any questions, and I'm going to pass it back over to Patrick Morrison to talk about our youth corps throughout the state. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost there. Thank you to all my colleagues. So we're going to wrap up with just kind of a few things that we want to promote. One is the Utah Core Collaborative. You know, this is just a wonderful organization, you know, across the state. They're training the future, like, land managers. So, you know, we may have some Forest Service, BLM, Park Service reps online right now. Many of them were probably part of these programs. So as you can see, you know, they're spread out across the state. Not only are they taking kind of youth, teaching them amazing leadership skills and transitioning them into land management, but through AmeriCorps programs, they're also able to really help leverage funding. So great partner, do great work with great people, and can really help leverage some funding. So you have their contacts there. We also have Dave Bastian from the Canyon Country Youth Corps online. He's available if anyone has any questions in chat. He could absolutely answer them there, but you can see those contacts. Also want to plug the Utah Trails Forum. This is a wonderful program that we started a couple of years ago now, but we like to bring together just industry professionals, trail advocates, volunteers, community leaders, and really just advance the building and care of our natural surface trails. It's, you know, hopefully a great knowledge sharing network, giving needed mentorship to people doing things. And, you know, we kind of have a culmination conference every single year. We're going to do our third annual this year in Richfield, May 10th and 11th. Last year was in Cedar City. It was such a fun time. The conference is essentially one day of in the field, like, you know, hands in the dirt workshops, and the second day more traditional classroom style. So check that out. That's on our website as well. You know, we'd really love to see you there, and can't wait for that. So one thing we want to point everybody to as many resources as we can. I do see a question. Any chance you can extend the abstract deadline? Allison, yes, I'm sure I can, or I can at least get your abstract to me if you want to email that to me. So we do want to make sure you have as many resources as you can on our website. So right now you can find our program guides, full application samples, planning resources, help with the budget, all the templates you're going to see during the applications, and more. I will always say, though, the best resource you may have is our awesome staff here. We really love these programs. We love our community partners, and it really is like an honor to be able to kind of reach out and help our applicants work through this, whether it's project planning, whether it's like just strictly the application, but we do want to help. And so please consider us as a fantastic resource. Reach out to us. And this is the yearly calendar. You know, I put this, I'm not going to read through this, but it just shows that, you know, we're doing a lot, and we always have stuff going on. So please stay abreast of kind of where we're going. You can see, you know, January through September, we're just kind of opening grant programs, closing grant programs, working with contracts. So So please stay up to date what we're doing. This is our contact information. You can see, depending on what program you're going to, you're going to have a best contact for it. However, if you reach out to any one of us, we'll be able to direct you to the right place. So with that, I want to bring attention to this QR code. I wonder if it works via the computer screen, but that's going to take you to our grant workshop tour resources folder. So in that folder, you can get the program guides for our UORG and our OVR programs, one-pagers for the ORPA and the RTP. You can download all of these slides. You'll see our annual reports. The outdoor classroom design guide is on there. So I think there's a one-pager from UCARE, an additional grant funding opportunity. So we'll put that link into the chat once more. But with that, we've kind of reached our end. So want to open it up for questions. Reminder, our next grant period opens on next Tuesday on the 17th. And you can see that URL right there. It's also going to be widely broadcast on our webpage. Coming up as well, we have our outdoor classroom workshop, or virtual workshop, that's later today at 4 p.m. We're going to be doing our NEPA Ninja, which is kind of a crash course in NEPA. That's February 2nd. Go to our Eventbrite page there to see that. We have Outdoor Recreation Day on the Hill coming up as well, so a lot of fun stuff going. I'll give it just a quick moment. Any questions coming up? If you want to throw those in the chat, we can get those answered, but if not, we'll go ahead and call it and send everyone off on their day. Seems silent. Okay, well, if you do have a question and you weren't able to get it in, maybe it's just a really long one that you're typing a lot on, feel free to email it to me or to any of our staff here. We're so thankful for all the work all of our project partners are doing out there. Y'all make us look really, really good. All the work that we put into it is only possible because we have you out there. So thank you so much. Is there a link to an outdoor classroom workshop? There is. If somebody wants to post that, we'll make sure that that gets posted. But that's today at 4 to 5 p.m. With our special guest, Hillary Lambert from the Wasatch Mountain Institute. So should be great. Really appreciate you all. Can't wait to see these amazing applications and keep supporting the work and then going and riding on these trails, fishing on these piers and going from there. So everybody have a great week. Thank you so much.